Some time ago, I did a video on the rumored RICO investigations that were coming to the church in the United States. In that video, I defined what RICO was, the implications of such an investigation, and the history of RICO. A link to that video will be at the end of this one. Over the past weekend, an article was brought to my attention in a Catholic Facebook group I'm part of that has some interesting Catholic media figures in it. The article in question is from Regina Magazine's website, which will be linked in the pinned comments below. Please read that article, because I'm not going to do my typical reading of an article and having it on the screen for you. I won't be doing that because the article is actually an interview between Regina's editor, Beth Stevens, and an anonymous federal law enforcement agency, and the interview is revealing. I won't be reading it the way I usually do out of respect to Regina, its author, and because you really need to read it. I'm just going to say that. I'll be going over some highlights of the piece here, but again, please read the article for yourself, especially if you or someone you know is a parish or diocesan employee. I'll be sending that article to the few that I know myself. It is critical that you do so. The article details the fact that the federal government has already launched its investigation into the Catholic Church in this country. They're creating an airtight case as well to avoid the funny business some dioceses are engaging in. As an example of funny business, maybe you saw the episodes of The Vortex released by Church Militant a month or two ago detailing how the Archdiocese of Detroit was quietly selling literally all church property to a nonprofit organization that had been started by a law firm directly tied to Archbishop Alan Vigneron. The timing was obvious because it was in the aftermath of McCarrick, in the aftermath of Vigano, and about the time that the RICO rumors really began to surface. If you didn't watch those, go watch them. The Church Militant YouTube channel is really easy to find. The nonprofit is still clearly tied to the Archdiocese of Detroit, but not in any technical fashion. The federal investigation into the abuse crisis in the church will include those organizations as well. You'll see why in a moment. Again, I'll only be going over some, but not all of the highlights of this article. Again, please read it. Here are some eye-opening elements. It appears that only lay employees of the dioceses are actually trained to address sex abuse allegations. Bishops, by all evidence, are not trained in the slightest, unless you count receiving bad advice from PR firms as training. And the law enforcement officer interviewed by the editor of Regina says it's because it leaves the bishops legally not culpable for things covered in the training. In other words, they're given a form of plausible deniability, one of the more grotesque features of the American political system, whereby public servants who knew fully well that evil or corrupt practices were going on in their agencies or administrations are able to get away with having done nothing to stop what was going on, or worse, even from benefiting from the malfeasance, because officially they knew nothing. Just a pro tip to any bishop who may be watching this video. If you're taking your cues from how to run the church from the US government or from nonprofit organizations or the UN, you should probably resign. The best example used by anonymous law enforcement official was the case of that reprehensible bishop in Missouri. I'll quote the law enforcement official directly for this. A prime example of this was when one bishop in a Missouri case said in a deposition that he didn't know if it was illegal for a priest to have sex with a minor. While it's pretty common sense that in most cases it's illegal for any adult to have sex with a minor, since he wasn't trained, most likely never went to law school, didn't train as a law enforcement agent, even if he has that common sense, he gave the legally correct answer. For my money as your humble YouTuber, this statement was the Catholic equivalent of "that depends on what the definition of is" from the Clinton impeachment hearings in the 1990s. The interview did reveal some startling details. The crimes that federal investigators are looking into include sexual abuse of minors and the rape of adults, as well as prostitution. Other crimes explicitly mentioned by the officer include drug trafficking, money laundering, embezzlement, human trafficking, and crimes committed by American citizens outside the United States. If you're not sure what the latter means, let me give you one example.
He's been the focus of a worldwide manhunt, but now authorities in Thailand say 32-year-old Christopher Neal, a suspected pedophile, is under arrest. He was taken into custody in northern Thailand early Friday. Neal is expected to be brought to the capital of Bangkok later in the day. Authorities were tipped off to his location after residents spotted him near the home of a Thai man who police say had helped him meet young boys in the past. Neal's been wanted ever since Interpol investigators were able to unscramble some pictures they say shows him sexually abusing young boys. Some of the boys were believed to be as young as 6. Neal is originally from Canada, where he was a school teacher. Brian Thomas, The Associated.
If you're wondering why I showed you that clip from the AP, I want you to imagine news clips like that later in this year and in 2020 and beyond of Catholic priests arrested for that exact crime. Imagine a Catholic priest in his collar and in his cassocks being frog-marched in handcuffs in front of the cameras. It's almost certainly coming. Thailand and other countries are destinations for what people call sexual tourism, where people can easily purchase the time, shall we say, of a minor. It's disgusting, and that kind of broadcast on NBC and CNN are definitely coming in 2019 and 2020. As evidence of this, in some cases there have been clergy already who have had their passports revoked and interstate travel limited. Already. In the Regina interview, law enforcement confirms that those of us not living in denial have been saying about the typical victim profile of a predator priest. Again, quoting directly, "We have found that in many cases victims come from situations in which there is little or no involvement of a parent or both parents in a child or young man's life. About 80% of these cases involve men. The young men especially generally are missing a strong father figure. These are or were the kids that always got dropped off for religious education and mass and then picked up afterwards. These families without a strong father figure should be convicting to all of us. The Church in America and beyond has quietly accepted the institutionalization of Catholic divorce under the guise of loosening annulment requirements. The predators are taking advantage of the rising numbers of annulments in the Church, not on purpose per se, but in the environment of broken homes and broken families created by this practice." The interview makes clear that the McCarrick case is what tipped off federal officials that this was a systematic problem in the Church in America and possibly beyond. McCarrick received help from others in finding his victims, getting funds to promote his corruption and locations to abuse them. He did this, and it was well known up the chain of command in the Church that he was dangerous, and yet he was promoted repeatedly. According to James Grind's most recent interview with Dr. Taylor Marshall, McCarrick had delusions that he'd be made pope someday. The law enforcement official makes clear that government is mapping the activities of these predator priests. I'll quote the article again directly. "Law enforcement is looking for connections between any known predator and others, as well as groups already known to be involved in criminal activity. Such connections would be with organizations that traffic drugs, any type of human trafficking, prostitution rings, and organizations that launder monies. The drugs specifically mentioned are cocaine, methamphetamine, opioids, ecstasy, flunitrazepam, rohypnol, temazepam, and GHB, the last 4 of which are strong date rape drugs that harm the memory of those abused." Finally, on the most terrifying part of the interview, the editor asks a simple question that could impact the lives of every Catholic in America. If a pattern is detected, can the government freeze and seize the assets of the Church in America? The answer, quoting directly, "It's not only possible, it is probable that much, if not all, of the Church's financial assets within at least the U.S. would be frozen. It's also possible that the Church's physical assets could be seized." In plain language, parish employees and expenses would not be paid, period. That would include the stipend of the good, innocent priest living in the rectory of your local parish. The light bill will not get paid. His grocery bill will not get paid. If the property is seized, that won't be limited to the odd amount of property the Church owns, like the old sawmill that the owner left to the Church upon his death. That could include parish churches or even worse. Why am I sharing this? Because you need to be ready for this. Parish shopping is a must. And if a lot of you are hostile to the irregular societies in the church, like the SSPX and similar organizations, there is a very real chance that the only officially declared valid but maybe not licit mass that you have access to will be with that kind of organization, depending on the diocese you live in. You need to prepare yourself for the possibility that you will not have access to a valid mass at all. You can help prevent this by offering to host an innocent holy priest in your home if it comes to it. We're talking about masses in garages and barns here, folks, at least for a while. Don't believe me? I'll end with this quote from the law enforcement official. It's important that everyone understand that the Catholic Church is now being investigated as a criminal organization on the federal level. This includes all entities within the Catholic Church, not just dioceses. It's the goal of law enforcement to bring an end to all the criminal activity within the church on every level. If you like videos like this, like and share this video and subscribe, and click the notification bell below. If you're interested in supporting my work, there are various options below, along with links to my Twitter, the Sources blog, and the Return to Tradition Facebook page. Thanks for listening. I'm Anthony Stein. Ave Maria.